This is a song about a man I met in Keene, New Hampshire. I now live near Keene, New Hampshire, in Harrisville, New Hampshire. Has anybody been to Harrisville? I just shop in the mill shop and take weaving classes. I don't weave or knit. And wool makes me itch. But it's pretty. So anyway, this is about a man named Dino Hoopus, who directs the barbershop group up there. And his family moved him to Keene during the Depression. And they bought a house that they turned into a restaurant that is now Henry David's. So if you've ever eaten out in Keene, you know what that is. And it was, at the time, a good deal because it was in between a regular set of railroad tracks and a siding. And not many people wanted to live there. It says a chorus. It goes like this. Ooh, ooh, clickety-clack. Ooh, ooh, rickety-rack. That's the sound that always takes me back to when we lived in the house between the tracks. That's your part. You want to try it? Ooh, ooh, clickety-clack. Ooh, ooh, rickety-rack. That's the sound that always takes me back to when we lived in the house between the tracks. You know, usually the lights are out in the audience and you can't see people, and all your mouths are moving at exactly the same time. It was in the Great Depression when my family moved to Keene, where we got a great deal on a house because it was between two sets of railroad tracks, but it was large and grand. Half home, half restaurant, the finest in the land. Well, Mom would be the waitress, and Dad would be the cook, but we would all pitch in because that was what it took. Though we were washing dishes, clearing tables, sweeping floors, I know that we were happier than we'd ever been before. Train sounds. Ooh, ooh, clickety-clack. Ooh, ooh, rickety-rack. That's the sound that always takes me back to when we lived in the house between the tracks. We listened to the radio, that's how we got the news of the bombing of Pearl Harbor when we entered World War II. Some trains full of soldiers were passing every day, so we packed the soldier sandwiches to eat along the way. That was a mouthful. The most exciting time was when the circus came through town. They'd park outside my window with the animals and clowns. I could hear the lions and the tigers roar at dusk, and once an elephant broke the window of my bedroom with its tusk. Ooh, ooh, clickety-clack. Ooh, ooh, rickety-rack. That's the sound that always takes me back to when we lived in the house between the tracks. Ooh, 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 one song about a train made me think of another song about a train. This one takes place in Waldo, Florida. Not much else does take place in Waldo, Florida. It used to be a big railroad junction, but since the day of the rail has declined and the day of the plane has increased, there isn't much traffic through Waldo, just 2 trains a day, one going north and one going south. And I was getting on the northbound train. And this is, they're almost all true stories tonight. But if they're not, I probably won't tell you. That's all you need to know. It doesn't really have a chorus, but the first verse repeats at the end, so you can sing that if you want. There's only only two trains that still stop in Waldo. North at midnight, south at dawn. When you hear that midnight whistle blowing, you'll know that I am gone. We walked the empty streets of Waldo. No one walks out after 9. And we read the history of the railroad at Waldo in the playground on a cast iron sign. And the moonlight shone on the white church at Waldo and cast a shadow of an oak across the grass. We smelled mimosa, honeysuckle, and roses while we waited for the long hours to pass. Then we said goodbye on the platform in Waldo, neath the street lamp that blinked off and on. And then we heard that midnight whistle blowing. The train moved and I was gone. Now there's only two trains that still stop at Waldo. North at midnight, south at dawn. When you hear that midnight whistle blowing, you'll know that I am gone. Oh, I'm gone. You'll know that I am gone. Larry Unger, would you come up here with your guitar for a minute? I've got loads of friends waiting in the audience for who knows what. But since we're doing train songs, I thought Larry would come up and do with me one of the first songs that we ever did together, which is called The Railroad Blues.
Nice
And
guitar, Larry.
who wrote it?
Some guy.
Careful folklorists, both of us. You want to sit or stand? They're set for both. Yeah, you want to stand? Did you just get it? Oh. Why don't you talk about this later, okay, guys? What key do we play this in?
I have no idea.
You know, do we play it in F? Or do we play it in C? F? Okay, good. That's what I thought.
What was that arrangement again?
Now's a fine time to ask me that. Great.
I don't know the difference. It wasn't even in tune when I bought it.
Ready? I think so. I think you play the high railroad sound.
I got the railroad blues, the railroad blues. Ain't got the railroad fare. Nowhere to go, nowhere to go. Nobody waiting for me there. I'm gonna catch me a freight train just as sure as you're born. Ride so far you think I'm dead and gone. I got the railroad blues, the railroad blues. Ain't got the railroad fare. You heard me, mister. Ain't got the railroad fare. I got the railroad blues, the railroad blues. Ain't got the railroad fare. Nowhere to go, nowhere to go. Nobody waiting for me there. I'm gonna ride all night just to keep from sleeping. Sleep all day just to keep from weeping. Got the railroad blues, the railroad blues. Railroad fare. You heard me, mister. Ain't got the railroad fare.
Play it, Larry.
Railroad blues, the railroad blues. Ain't got the railroad fare. Nowhere to go, nowhere to go. Nobody waiting for me there. I'm gonna ride all night just to keep from sleeping. Sleep all day just to keep from weeping. Got the railroad blues, the railroad blues. Ain't got the railroad fare. You heard me, mister. Ain't got the railroad fare.
Because it's such a treat for us to get to play together, we're going to do another song. This is from the Cherokee Marching Band. Is that from Georgia? No? The Georgia Marching Band from Cherokee? No. It is a
fife and drum band from Mississippi. What is it?
Georgia.
Anybody here from Alabama? Anybody here from Mississippi?
Oh.
No, it's from Alabama. Well, I'll buy you Chevrolet. Gonna buy you a Chevrolet.
I want a minivan.
I'll buy you a Chevrolet if you do something for me. If you do something for me.
I don't want no Chevrolet. I don't want no Chevrolet. I don't want no Chevrolet. And you can't do nothing for me now. You don't do nothing for me.
Well, I'll buy you a brand new home. I'm gonna buy you a brand new
I
home.
want a condo on Beacon Street.
I'll buy you a little shack if you do something for me. If you do something for me.
I don't want no brand new shirt. don't want no brand new shack. I don't want no brand new shack. And you can't do nothing for me now. Can't do nothing for me at all.
Well, I'll buy you a brand new guitar. I'm gonna get you a green guitar. Get you a green guitar with the hula dancer in the back. You do something.
I just got a new guitar. I already got a new guitar. Plus yours is ugly. So you can't do nothing for me. Can't do nothing for me. At least you can play it.
Well, I'll buy you a brand new dress. I'll get you a brand new dress. You could use a brand new dress. You do something for me. You do something for me.
I don't want a brand new dress. I can't use a brand new dress. You can't keep your brand new dress. You can't do nothing for me. You can't do nothing for me.
All right. Last chance. Well, I'll buy you a wedding ring. A very nice wedding ring. I'll buy you a wedding ring if you do something for me. If you do something for me.
What is it you want?
All I want is
Let's see, a wedding ring.
a car. You get two any two.
I don't want a wedding ring. I don't want your wedding ring. I don't want your wedding ring. And you can't do nothing for me, boy. You can't do nothing for me.
Well, I'll buy you a Chevrolet. Buy you a Chevrolet. American made. Buy you a Chevrolet. If you do. If you do.
I can't believe you said that on stage. I don't want a Chevrolet. I don't want a Chevrolet. I don't want your Chevrolet. And you can't do nothing for me. It's final.
It's your loss.
You can't do nothing for me. Larry Unger. My goodness. Larry, when are you playing, or have you played?
Yes. Yeah, on Friday at 8 o'clock.
Oh.
And 4 o'clock.
And when?
Saturday at 4.
Oh. Well, I hope you enjoyed him.
Yeah.
And he's got a book of tunes that he wrote that's for sale, and also a cassette and album called Rags, Tunes, and Hot Lit, and other stuff for guitar. And he's a really good guitarist. Okay. Well, maybe it's time to start fulfilling some requests. Here's one I wrote for my parents, who are about to, well, if they make it another 6 months, they'll celebrate their 38th anniversary. But I wrote this for their 32nd. That's the shanty sing in the chorus. Is anybody in the wrong place? My parents, they waltzed on the boardwalk in Asbury Park late one spring, while my sisters and I stood embarrassed, amazed they could do such a thing. And they danced around on the boardwalk as the sunlight danced on the sea. They danced to the tunes of the merry-go-round in front of my sisters and me. Now sometimes my parents would quarrel and argue and throw things and curse, but they never stopped loving each other, so I guess that it could have been worse. And they danced around on the boardwalk as the sunlight danced on the sea. They danced to the tunes of the merry-go-round in front of my sisters and me. Now sometime, someday, I hope I'll get married to a man with some virtues, some faults, and sometimes we'll laugh, sometimes quarrel, but when we're on a boardwalk, we'll waltz just like they danced around on the boardwalk as the sunlight danced on the sea. They danced to the tunes of the merry-go-round in front of my sisters and me. They danced to the tunes of the merry-go-round in front of my sisters and me. I'd like to be really depressing for a couple of minutes and read a poem and then sing a song that are both about death and how that, what I think about it, affects me and us. She stood bewildered on the island, crying in the shoulder-high grass, daisies swaying in the wind, suddenly bereft of a mate. She calls and calls to him, looking north and west, east and south. But this is no game of hide and seek, no teasing courtship dance. Their offspring instantly fatherless, and she cannot remember a time when they were not together, partners in love and travel, in work and flight. One car after another racing for home in the dimming light pounds over the body, reducing still further the strength, awkward grace, instinct, and intelligence to scraps of flesh, feather, and bone, returned prematurely to earth. I cried with her sudden deprivation mine, our fragility, our love, always threatened by indifferent violence. John died in the garden with the sunlight full upon him, with a soft spring breeze blowing, and the lilacs fully blooming, resting in the new grass. The bees were just awakening in the quiet of the morning. The birds were just returning. Who would have kept him a year in a hospital bed, unable to speak or to move? And who would have kept him inside, tied up to tubing? What would that prove? Would that prove love? Barbara found him in the garden, and she thought her heart was broken to know he died before her, and she'd have to live without him. But they'd often talked about it, and she knew he would have wanted to die sharply, swiftly, in the beauty of the garden. Who would have kept him a year in a hospital bed, unable to speak or to move? Who would have kept him inside, tied up to tubing? What would that prove? Would that prove love? And I'm so afraid of dying, but if I could die easy, with a full life behind me, and my loved ones all around me, to die in the garden one early spring morning, with the bees softly humming, and the lilacs fully blooming. There's a song about a jazz musician. This is a true story. It's just that I don't know who it's about. I got it from an interview I heard on the radio. I was so excited about what he was saying, I just forgot to find out who was saying it. Smoke in the air and the neon lights flashing, men with gold watch chains and fancy cigars, fancier women, big voices, big smiles. Here's my fancy women now. Big music that heats up the night. Jazz like icebergs, jazz like fire, jazz like thunder on a late summer's night. Jazz like neon, electric and wild, jazz like the silver moonlight. Joe bought an old sax and he took a few lessons, hitched rides with the gamblers in their smooth rolling cars, drank with the women and followed the jazzmen through the streets and the Kansas City bars, playing jazz like icebergs, jazz like fire, jazz like thunder on a late summer's night, jazz like neon, electric and wild, jazz like camellias in the silver moonlight. Then the church folk took over and they busted the city. Joe married his sweetheart and went into sales. The jazzmen and gamblers all of Kansas City on one lamplit street, his lone saxophone wails. Jazz like icebergs, jazz like fire, jazz like thunder on a late summer's night, jazz like neon, electric and wild, jazz like camellias in the silver moonlight. These are two very good friends of mine from California. We haven't seen each other since last February, I think. Well, I've seen Kristina. This is Kristina Olsen. And on her right and mine is Joyce Woodson. Joyce, can I get you to sneak in a song? Now, Joyce doesn't have a time slot this year, so I'd like to give her a piece of mine. Yeah, I was hoping you would. What is she? Oh, actually, you're right. That's probably better.
This is my first time on the East Coast. It's really fun. I danced 4 entirely different kinds of dances today, and I'm just having a blast. So really a good introduction to the East Coast. Do you want to sing on Cowboy's Walk? Sure. This is a song I wrote. It was my first protest song. And this is appropriate. I went to a folk dance. I went to a folk dance at a club in Los Angeles about 6 years ago, and they played a waltz, and I love waltzes. I spent some time in Sweden learning to waltz the right way. Anyway, this is my protest because none of the fellows there knew how to waltz, and I went home mad as heck. I wrote this song. Here we go. Young man, I advise that you listen to me when going to court your bride to be. When you take her along to that rodeo dance, you better know how to waltz. You can waltz 2, 3 to the Tennessee waltz. 2, 3, how can you hold her without her hand on my shoulder? Waltz 2, 3 to the Blue Danube Strauss. You don't need to say a word at all. When a cowboy can choice. But if you don't know how to waltz, you won't hold on to her long. You can try a two-step or two, you can ply her with Jim Beam or brew, but when the light turns low and she turns to you, you better know how to waltz. You can waltz 2, 3 to the Tennessee waltz. 2, 3, how can you hold her without her hand on your shoulder? Waltz 2, 3 to the blue Danube Strauss. You don't need to say a word at all when a cowboy can waltz. If you'd rather be straddling that gal who's side saddling, you better learn how to waltz.
Joyce, Woodson, and Kristina Olsen. And if you go to Kristina's set, you'll hear more of Joyce, as well as more of Kristina tomorrow. Tomorrow, what time?
3:30, I think.
3:30, Kristina Olsen and Joyce Woodson. Thank you very much for doing that. That's fun. And that made me think of another song about a courtship that begins with some dancing. We met on the veranda, watched the sunset o'er the bay. Then he asked me for a tango, and we danced the night away. He had eyes just like brown velvet, he had skin like satin sheets, and as we danced there to the music, his hips swayed with the conga beat. Courted by a Venezuelan, while the sea was at low tide, we talked of how we'd go sailing across the ocean deep and wide. We talked of pasts and presents, about our jobs and families. He had a ranch with many servants and parrots roosting in the trees. He said, come live in Venezuela, have my children, be my wife, be the mistress of my villa and the pleasure of my life. Courted by a Venezuelan, making plans to be his bride, tickets bought to go a-sailing across the ocean deep and wide. Well, he returned to Venezuela, wrote me letters every day, said things were ready at the villa, and he would meet me on the quay. So I packed up my belongings and I shipped them ocean freight. Then I received a telegram and it only told me wait. Jilted by a Venezuelan, now I'll never be his bride, and I'll never go a-sailing across the ocean deep and wide. He wrote his mother had objected, although he'd begged her on his knees, said I should find another sweetheart and someday forgive him, please. Well, I can find another sweetheart if I want one bad enough, but I've sublet my apartment and I've shipped off all my stuff. Jilted by a Venezuelan, now I'll never be his bride, and I'll never go sailing across the ocean deep and wide. Well, I expected to feel angry, but instead I felt relieved. Well, I'd been hoping for a hero, so I was easily deceived. Still, I've come to some conclusions while staring at my empty shelves. Instead of waiting to be rescued, we could be rescuing ourselves. Jilted by a Venezuelan, everybody, so I'll never be his bride. I still can go sailing across the ocean deep and wide. Jilted by a Venezuelan, so I'll never be his bride. I still can go sailing across the ocean deep and wide. If there's anything that you came to hear that you wanted to hear that I haven't done, yes. Erica Levine. What else? Yes. Pardon me? Oh my God. I don't think I can do that tonight, if that's okay with you. Yeah, why not? The guy who wrote Erica Levine, Bob Blue, is here right now. He's the one guy who isn't clapping. When Erica Levine was 7.5, up to her door came Jason Metcalf, and she said, "Will you marry me, Erica Levine?" And Erica Levine said, "What do you mean?" "Well, my mother and my father say a fella ought to marry, and my father said his brother, who is my Uncle Larry, never married, and he said Uncle Larry is a dope, so will you marry me?" Said Erica, "Nope." My piano teacher's smart, and she never had to marry, and your father may be right about your Uncle Larry, but not being married isn't what made him a dope. Don't ask me again, 'cause my answer's nope. When Erica Levine was 17, she went to the prom with Joel Bernstein, and they danced by the light of a sparkling bobby sock, 'cause the theme of the prom was the history of rock. And after the prom, Joel kissed her at the door, and he said, "Do you know what that kiss was for?" She said, "No, I don't, but you kissed just fine." And he said, "What it means is that you are mine." And she said, "No, I'm not," and she rushed inside. And on the way home, Joel Bernstein cried. She cried too, and wrote a letter to Ms., saying, "This much I know, I'm mine, not his." When Erica Levine was 23, her lover said, "Erica, marry me. This relationship is answering a basic need, and I'd like to have it legally guaranteed. For without your precious love, I would surely die. So why don't we make it legal?" Said Erica, "Why? Basic needs at your age should be met by you. I'm your lover, not your mother. Let's be careful what we do. For if ever I should marry, I will marry to grow, not for tradition or protection or possession, no. I love you, but your needs are a very different issue." Then he cried, and Erica handed him a tissue. When Erica was 30, she was talking with Lou, discussing and deciding what they wanted to do. When we marry, should we move into your place or mine? Yours is rent controlled, but mine is on the green line. And they argued and they talked, and they finally didn't care. So they rented an apartment near Davis Square. The wedding was a simple one, they wanted it that way. And they thought a lot about the things that they would choose to say. I will live with you and love you, but I'll never call you mine. The judge pronounced them married, and everyone had wine. And a happy ever after life is not the sort they got, but they tended to be happy more often than not. I was just thinking about how many fine songwriters and tune writers and singers are all in this room tonight. And how great it is to have a festival where everybody can get together under one roof and sweat. It's important. So I'm just trying to find something suitable to end with. And this would maybe have been better to start with, but too bad. This is a... You'll laugh at anything. This is a love song to a mathematician, and you'll know why. The afternoon light is just fading as I gaze out the kitchen at the view. There's apple trees, telephone wires, and some birds, and I'm 3,000 miles from you. It's unusually cold here in Venice. Last night it dropped down to 32. So I slept under 4 borrowed down sleeping beds, 3,000 miles from you. Well, it's 25 cents for a letter. It's $1 for a long distance call. And it's $300 to fly back again. And I can't afford that at all. It's a block to the 7-Eleven. It's a mile to the ocean so blue. It's a month till I get in my car and I drive those 3,000 miles to you. Now it's 29 cents for a letter. It's $1 for a long distance call. And it's $300 to fly back again. And I can't afford that at all. It's a block to the 7-Eleven. It's a mile to the ocean so blue. It's a month till I get in my car and I drive those 3,000 miles to you. 3,000 miles to you. for coming and say that there are some tapes at the performer's booth, and I also have some with me, so if you want to meet me in the hall, especially if you're after the new short sister.